Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second edition of Ask Megan, the my new LinkedIn Live series where I answer questions that people are uh, sending me. So today's session is about a topic that I get a lot of questions about all year long, but this year in particular, I'm getting a lot of questions on the budget process and, in particular, building business cases because I know that it's a tough year. I mean, every year feels tough, but this is particularly tough because there's so much uncertainty in the economy. So, I wanted to talk about some tips and tricks and strategies that I've learned for getting people to be more likely to give the green light to your business case. Um, so the question starts with um, who is your audience? This is one of the things that I know we all know, but it's good to be reminded. You want to tailor your talk track to the audience. I recently was working on a presentation for an executive team, and they had some turnover in the executive team. And the new group that we were going to be presenting to was significantly different in terms of their attitude and their experience and their familiarity with the work that we'd been doing, extremely different to the group that we had originally planned for. So we actually came back and regrouped because the same ideas need to be talked about a different way. First of all, for people to understand them. And second of all, for them to really resonate with people based on their experience. It makes me think of there's a saying that my mom taught me when I was in college: you never pass a class, you pass a teacher, which means that, you can have objective criteria for what is good and not good, but ultimately there is a human being who is applying those criteria. So you want to think about who is the teacher in this case, or who is the person or people that are going to be approving your business case. One of the tricks that I use to do this, I call it a virtual lineup. So on the first slide of the presentation, while I'm developing it, because there's usually slides, I actually grab the pictures of all the people that are going to be in the room from LinkedIn, and I put them up in just a simple little grid. It's not something that I'm ever going to show them, but it's something that I use so that when I'm thinking about how do I want to talk about this, I can go back and really look at their faces as if I were sitting in front of them in the meeting and think about how would I describe this. It's a little bit like a persona. So the first thing is to think about who your audience is and how you need to tailor your talk track to them. Then the second thing is to describe your proposal in 3 sentences or less. This was really based on some research that I did years ago. I interviewed executives who approve business cases, and I asked them to tell me what makes you accept or reject a business case. And I said, are there any deal breakers? And they said, well, you would be shocked at the number of times people come in and they present a business case and we have no idea what they're actually proposing. The way they describe their proposal is so complicated and so convoluted that we don't really understand what it is they're trying to get us to improve. I said, well, do you ask clarifying questions? They said, no. We have plenty of other projects that people can articulate very clearly that we can choose to fund. So if you don't show up with a clear, crisp definition of what it is you're asking us to buy with the money that you're looking for, then that's pretty much going to be an automatic no. And this is really tough for people because you get so close to the project and you get so caught up in all of the buzzwords and those things that you think you're being clear and crisp and concise, when in reality, you're not, to people who are not as familiar with the work as you are. So I would take a step back and say, how could I describe this in 3 sentences or less? One of the tools that I put out there is a tool to actually do this. It's called the Customer Experience Project Pyramid, and it's got 4 questions. So that if you're trying to describe a project to improve the experience, it has you write down which experience, better how, for who, and why. And then you use that information to put together that nice tight sentence, 10th sentence that says, we want to improve the blank experience for blank customers by making it more blank and less blank. We believe that that different experience will cause those people to do more of X and less of Y. It's a very simple and very effective way to articulate changes to the customer experience in ways that don't kind of get wrapped up in high level words. So that is my second recommendation. My third recommendation has to do with the fact that business cases are actually not about whether or not something is a good idea. You have to explain why your idea is the best thing to do right now. Because everybody who walks in the door with a business case has a good idea. So I've seen a lot of people get frustrated, come in, we made the business case, we explained why this was going to be positive, but we still didn't get an approval. Well, yeah, because everybody had a good case. So as you're putting together your presentation and your talk track, think about timing. Why is this the best thing to do right now? Are there factors that make it critical? If we don't do this, we're going to fall behind. How might waiting change the potential return on investment? Could something cost more to do a year or 2 years from now? No matter the way things are going, everything's going to cost more. Is there a compounding effect that by doing it now, as opposed to waiting a year, you'll get exponential benefit? And then also talking about what is the cost of not doing this now, right? What is the risk? With the Customer Experience Index, we used to see that companies that really didn't do much to change their experience tended to dip year over year when they kept things more stable, not because the experience was bad, but because what got high scores the year before had come to be sort of expected and known. So we're chasing a higher bar. So talking about, is there a risk of doing nothing? And then also thinking about compounding effects. Are there other things that the organization is trying to do that will become easier or even unnecessary if you do this particular work now? And that's true with a lot of replatforming projects, a lot of digital experience projects. There's a cascade effect that says if we do this, then all of these other things will be easier and faster to do. So that is my third recommendation. My fourth recommendation is really just based on the psychology of choice. It is offer them options, and 3 options are ideal. People are more likely to say yes to something when it's presented to something, anything, when they're given a set of options than just a yes or no decision. And 3 is kind of the sweet spot. And when you're thinking about, well, what are the 3 options you could give people? I like to use a framework that I learned from a friend in the negotiation space. It's called wish, want, walk. So option 1 is the wish option. If you could have your ideal dream, what would you wish for? That's sort of the top level scope of the project. Want is what you realistically want, what you think you can get, sort of the most likely outcome. And walk is what's the floor? What's the minimum that if we can't get approval to do at least this thing, it's not even worth bothering? That does a couple things. It makes sure that your project doesn't kind of get the knees cut out from under it if people approve a scope that's so small that you're like, this isn't even worth doing. But it also makes it more likely that people are going to pick the most likely option is the middle option. And there's a lot that goes into the psychology of choice like that I can talk about with folks offline if they want to. But having kind of 3 variations of your project set out ahead of time that you can offer people makes it more likely that they're going to say yes to some version of it. And then the fourth option is to include an off-ramp to lower perceived risk, right? Choosing to go with one project creates opportunity costs. If they say yes to you, they're saying no to something else. And people always worry, am I making the right decision? Is this really going to work out? And so by including in your plans an off-ramp, you can call it a pilot, you can call it a checkpoint, whatever you want to call it, but in your presentation actually saying, and we're going to pause at this point and say, is this still the right thing to be doing? Should we keep going? That lowers the perceived risk of saying yes to this initiative because people have a way to step back if they decide that that wasn't the right option or they change their mind, right? It's why companies put their return policies up front, because people want to know, what's my off ramp if this isn't the right product for me? And the same thing is true with projects. Now, the reality is that very few companies and very few leadership teams will actually cancel a project once it's approved. Very often, quite frankly, to their detriment. They should think about, what do we cancel? What do we stop doing? But having that off-ramp there as an opportunity makes people feel better about trying something that maybe they might be a little bit nervous about trying otherwise. So there's a sixth thing that I want to include, which is have a plan for what you'll do if they say no. And the reason for this, quite frankly, is for your own benefit, because these things can be stressful. And years ago, I learned as a technique for dealing with anxiety that if you imagine the worst case scenario, then you can think about, what would I do in that case? And you have a plan. You're like, okay, even if the worst happens, I know that I will be okay. I will have a path forward. And when you think about that ahead of time, it's not pessimistic. It's actually a strategy for success, because it takes some of the pressure off of you. And when you're not feeling as pressured, you deliver better, you're more clear, you're more articulate, and that increases the likelihood of getting yes. So by anticipating a no, you reduce your anxiety and increase the likelihood of getting a yes. I know it seems like a weird thing to do, but I've done it myself. I do it all the time, quite frankly, and it really does help. So that was 6 tips. One of the things you might have noticed is that none of those tips have anything to do with numbers. And that's because in most cases, the business case presentations are not about the numbers. The numbers are necessary, but not sufficient. And what makes the difference is the conversation, the way it's framed, the way you talk about it, the way the options are presented. So number 1, tailor your talk track to the audience. Number 2, describe your proposal in 3 short, clear sentences or less. Number 3, talk timing. Explain why this is the best thing to do right now. Number 4, offer 3 options so that people are more likely to choose from one of those options than just saying yes or no. Number 5, including an off-ramp to mitigate the perceived risk. Give people an out so they're more likely and willing to take a chance on something. And number 6, have a plan for what you will do if they say no. Not only because it's practical, but because it takes some of the pressure off and actually helps you get to yes. I hope that these tips are helpful. The recording will be up on LinkedIn if you want to go through them again. And I know there's a lot to this and there's a lot of, but what about, it depends. If you want to get input on your specific business case, message me and I can send you information about how to book a private feedback session, just one-on-one, to talk about your specific situation. But I think if you sit down with your team and talk through these tips, you'll find that they're fairly easy to apply. So good luck with your business case presentations and stay tuned. I will be back for another episode of Ask Megan LinkedIn Live next month in August. And the topic is going to be beating burnout, because I know a lot of people will coming back from vacation. We're getting ready to head into September and Q4, and it can get absolutely nuts. So I'm going to share with you some of my own strategies that I use to come back from extreme burnout, and then strategies I use now to prevent myself from ever getting back there, so that you can go into this busy season with some tools that can help you buffer and make your end of year a much better experience. So until then, be well, thank you, and have a great day.